All right, cool. So just to start with, my name is Aaron Ladegi. I am a senior UI engineer at DEG and have been functioning kind of an architect capacity at DEG in regards to Contentful lately. So DEG, we are a full service marketing agency, and as part of our work, we've been gradually transitioning from more traditional legacy CMSs into the headless space, and particularly into content as a service, and even more specifically, looking at Contentful as our CMS platform of choice in that space. So I'm going to go over that a little bit today, but I kind of want to do a little bit of a show of hands just to see what everybody's exposure is to headless or to content as a service, or I guess specifically Contentful. I know how well this always goes, but I'm going to try it anyway. If everybody could use their little thumbs up feature in Zoom, who here has worked with some sort of content as a service platform specifically? I got one thumbs up, and that person works with me. So, oh, I got two. Okay, good to know. I guess it's going to be an even smaller list, but in the kind of content as a service space, who has worked with Contentful specifically? All right, we've got one. All right, so this will be, that helps a lot. That kind of gives me an idea of where to start with here. So that'll be good. So like I said, DEG has been working in the kind of headless and content as a service space for probably 6 months to a year, if I really want to round up. And we've had a lot of learnings in that time. So I kind of want to walk everybody through what content as a service is in general, and how that's really having an impact on how CMSs work in general. I realized as I was putting this presentation together that this is the KC React meetup, and I barely mention React. I'm pretty specifically talking about content as a service, but I just want to call out from the beginning that CAS plays incredibly nicely with React, or really any kind of front-end application framework. So even if I'm not explicitly mentioning React a lot, please know that this is a definite great source of feeding content for your React-based projects, and I'll try to highlight where those things are true. So I think by talking about content as a service, you kind of have to have an understanding of where CMSs have come from and where they're going. If you think about kind of in the 2000s, for anybody who's been working in this field for that long, the kind of traditional CMSs, these dynamic web content management platforms and systems that we're all familiar with, really kind of took hold in the industry. So your WordPresses, your Drupals, PHP definitely had its heyday, I think, during that time period. In the 2010s, we started seeing kind of an expansion of that model, particularly at the enterprise level, into platforms that are more of a full digital experience platform. And then we started seeing more recently, probably in the last few years, this advent of headless CMSs and content as a service. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So first, I think we need to talk a little bit about these traditional or legacy CMS platforms. I want to call it a few names just so people know what I'm referencing. I will say several of these platforms have started moving into more of a headless architecture, or offer that as an option. So I don't want to call these out as like they don't have paths forward or anything like that. But these are your kind of CMS names that you've probably heard for quite some time. So things like WordPress, Drupal, also Sitecore, and Adobe Experience Manager, platforms like that. Core characteristics of these platforms, they generally speaking are fairly monolithic. In other words, they're meant to be kind of this hub of digital management. You're not doing a whole lot of shopping outside of that platform if you choose a CMS, because it typically has all the features kind of predefined for you. So things like internationalization, multilingual features, asset management, that sort of thing. Another core characteristic is that in a legacy CMS, content and the presentation layer are really tightly coupled. So what that typically means is that your presentation layer is rendered by the CMS itself on the CMS's server. So in other words, when a user visits your website, it's actually hitting the CMS, might be behind a load balancer or CDN or anything like that, but it's hitting the CMS. The CMS is taking that request, it's compiling the page, and it's spitting it back to the end user. One problem that comes with that is it makes it difficult to easily repurpose that same content across other sites or medium because you're so tightly coupling your presentation layer to the actual content itself. And if you think about it this way, so in a traditional CMS, especially when you're talking responsive design, this is pretty easy, right? We can build one website that powers your desktop and your mobile experiences pretty easily, in a responsive fashion. What gets a lot harder is when you move into this world where you're talking about kind of an omni-channel approach, where maybe you're still building a website for your client or for your project. But maybe in addition to that, they're saying, we want to use that same content that we're using to serve our website, and we want to push that out to an app store, an app on the App Store, or we want to make a watch application. I guess that's still technically an app, but you get the idea. Maybe it's feeding a voice skill, something like, I can't say the name because I have one sitting here, an A word or a Google device. Maybe it's something crazy like a virtual reality experience, or maybe you're doing something like an in-store kiosk. The idea is that in a traditional CMS or a legacy CMS, crossing all these channels can be really hard because they're not necessarily designed to do this out of the box. Another core kind of characteristic is that a lot of times in these traditional CMSs, the content that you're putting in is being put in strictly for the purposes of being displayed in that that channel that it's designed to be displayed in. So on a website, for example. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the context has a lot of meaning or hierarchy. And I like to say that in a legacy CMS, really rich text editors or WYSIWYGs, whatever you want to call them, they're kind of a black hole. Once you put that content in there, they lose all their hierarchical meaning. A lot of times they are just regurgitated back as whatever HTML the RTE or the WYSIWYG decides to apply to that content. And you can't really get a lot of contextual meaning out of that at that point. Also, that content gets really tightly associated with the page or the component that it's been dropped into. So that's great unless you need to take that same content and move it to some other component or some other page or a completely different interface or website or application. So let's talk content as a service a little bit. So that's kind of just an overview of what traditional CMSs were like. Content as a service is a drastic change in that model. And I'm hoping after you guys see this today, you'll see where a lot of the advantages come, particularly as it relates back to React and JavaScript-based applications. The one I want to talk about today is Contentful, and that's largely because that's the platform that I have the most experience with working at DEG. In kind of the enterprise tier, we did a pretty good amount of research on other kind of enterprise level content as a service platforms that are out there. So these are things like Content Stack, Amplience, Kentico or Kentico, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. You might actually be familiar with the name Kentico. They make a traditional CMS as well, but Kentico Content is their content as a service or headless offering. Bloomreach, eSpirit, which I would say I think eSpirit sounds like a vape company, but apparently they're a CAS platform. And these are mostly enterprise level because that's kind of what we deal in DEG. But there's quite a few more consumer grade, I guess you'd say, platforms out there. And I'm totally blanking on names right now. I know Netlify makes a Netlify CMS that is essentially content as a service, and I believe that one's actually open source and free. There's a few others floating around out there too that you may have heard of, but these are examples of CAS platforms. Core characteristics of CAS. By design, CAS is content as a service. It solves the content piece of a digital experience puzzle. What that means is you can infinitely combine that with other specialized products and plugins. So I'm kind of speaking general about CAS, but in Contentful regard, there's a lot of best of breed plugins or ways to extend your Contentful experience or your CAS experience. Good examples of that would be adding in an e-commerce solution, digital asset management, internationalization, personalization, A/B testing. All of these let you kind of take an a la carte approach where you can use CAS as your content management, but then you can add in and extend all these other tools to create kind of this collection of services that take care of all your needs at the same time. The other thing that I think is interesting is you might be working in another CMS platform, or more accurately, you might be working in like an e-commerce platform. A lot of e-commerce platforms are not necessarily known for their content management experience, put that mildly. So it's totally possible with CAS to actually integrate that directly alongside your commerce experience. So that could work in one of two ways. You might be pulling commerce content into your CAS system and displaying it on a single website, or you might be exporting your CAS content into your e-com experience or your traditional CMS platform. So there's actually ways to kind of intermingle and mix and match your content across platforms. Another very key characteristic is it is completely decoupled from the presentation layer in a CAS system. So in most of these systems, Contentful included, there's no concept of a presentation layer. There's actually nothing to do with a website or a page or anything like that. CAS is designed completely around structuring and serving your content, and nothing to do with presentation. That takes a little bit of getting used to, and can take a little bit of getting used to for your clients or your business owners as well. But it's pretty powerful once you kind of get used to it. The great thing about that is because we're not coupled to our presentation, we can choose how we want to present that content and where we want to present that content. It's that magical business speak word of omni-channel, right? So it's this one platform that's able to serve content out across all of our channels and all of our properties. And I had to put React in here somewhere. I just had to because it's a React meetup. This could be your source of truth, your source of content for pretty much any modern headless or static site generated project. So anytime you're doing like a React single page application or React project, or if you're working with kind of best of breed static site generators like Gatsby or Next, or if you're coming from Vue, Nuxt.js, things like that, this fits in perfectly. There are plugins for a lot of these platforms for Contentful or any of these CAS services that make setting it up take like 5 minutes or less, very quick. So speaking specifically to Contentful, I kind of want to call out their ecosystem a little bit. So I mentioned that it's extensible and you kind of want to create this, this hub of services. So if you look on the left, we take all of our third-party systems. So we've got the Contentful web app itself, but then we might be pulling in things like digital assets, e-com, other cloud services. Contentful operates entirely in APIs. So there's a content management API that's used to pull content in and out of Contentful's infrastructure itself. And then when you're trying to serve this out to your own applications, then you use one of three APIs. One is the delivery API. So think of that as like your production API endpoint. You have a preview API, which if you're familiar with preview functionality built into things like Next.js or Gatsby, incredibly powerful way to preview sites, statically generated sites before they're actually statically generated. And then really a pretty amazing image API, and I'm going to show you a little bit of that today in a little small demo. Incredibly powerful image manipulation on the fly, straight out of Contentful. And then as you'll see, you can use those APIs to power pretty much any channel or any application that you need. So whether that's your website, some sort of store kiosk, a native app, in-store experience, anything like that, can all be powered with Contentful. Again, no presentation layer whatsoever. This is entirely API in, API out. Well, I shouldn't say API in. There is a management interface, but it's entirely API out. So you are writing custom applications that consume Contentful content via those APIs. I mentioned static site generation, and since this is React, I wanted to pull in a slide from some of our DEG documentation, which is basically how this works. So when you're coding, you have your application code base with React and whatever other tooling you need there. And then you have your content managers entering content into the headless CMS, so Contentful in this case. Any change made in either of those, either the blue or the green circles, will trigger your static site generation. So with your application code base, that means you basically have, for example, Next.js running on your CI/CD, and it's doing static site generation whenever you push to a branch on your version control. In the case of your headless CMS, the question that often comes up is, okay, I see how to make this change from my code base. How does this work from the CMS? And it basically works off the concept of webhooks. So when Contentful content is published or unpublished or scheduled to publish or anything like that, it basically fires off a webhook. And so you would just wire your CI/CD system up to listen for those webhooks. And whenever those happen, it just does the static site generation and builds out to your host, wherever that might be. Other core characteristics. So I mentioned before that in kind of legacy CMSs, I mentioned that black hole of content. The big differentiator in CAS is that all of your content has hierarchical value. And that is actually a really integral part of working on a CAS project because you have to do something called content modeling. And that's the idea of really sitting down and evaluating what all your content is and what all the relationships between your various pieces of content are. And then modeling that out in the contentful structure, in your cast structure. And then what that does is it gives everything actual meaning and hierarchy. And it also lets you re-piece that content back together. So as an example, if I have an author content type in my model, I could pull that author into other models or other content types within my model so that I can reuse that throughout and kind of extend it and do all kinds of cool stuff with the content. And everything has meaning, so it's very easy to rely on your data. One thing I think is really cool is if you're coming from a legacy CMS, you probably have mixed opinions of those rich text editors, the WYSIWYG interface. The one in Contentful is incredibly flexible, but what's really cool is on the output, when you actually get that API data back, you're not getting a blob of HTML like you would in other CMSs. You're actually getting it delivered as hierarchical JSON. In other words, if you have a bunch of paragraphs in an RTE, it's going to feed you back the content with nodes in the JSON that actually tell you what that piece of content is. So you can kind of pull it out and like reassemble it on the fly as you need. So it makes it incredibly flexible because everything has meaning, but also you can kind of reassemble it based on your channel or your medium, however you need to do it. So that's a pretty cool feature that people aren't used to if they're coming from traditional. Other strengths of kind of cast in general, really easily reconfigurable. As I mentioned, you're doing a lot of content modeling. So if you need to reconfigure how that content groups together, you can do that on the fly. It's perfect for multi-channel or multi-site clients and projects. It's great when your content needs context or hierarchy. And mentioning Next.js, it feeds, or static site generation, it feeds very, very well into really highly optimized performant front-end experiences. A shot on the left is, I won't name any names, but I took a screenshot of my Lighthouse scores from a legacy CMS project that I'd worked on, and I took a screenshot of basically an out-of-the-box Gatsby project that I did that was tied to Contentful. And as you guys know, if you've worked with static site generators at all, it doesn't guarantee you great Lightbox scores, but it's definitely optimized in a way that lets you achieve those scores pretty easily. Specifically with Contentful, some features that it offers, I'm doing my best to not make this a Contentful commercial, but I did want to call out some things that it does really well. It has internationalization built into it, or as they like to call it, locales. So built-in functionality for that that's really easy to enable and add onto. It has a built-in app framework, so there's actually a way to customize the interface, the management interface within Contentful itself. So you can do some really powerful things there as well. There is, I could go on. Testing environments and out into production. How do we make sure that our content models and also the content associated with those models moves along with it into the various areas? My internet says it's unstable. I'm going to kill my video and see if that helps. Can everybody still hear me?
Yeah, you cut out for a sec, but you're good now.
Okay, cool. Sorry about that. I'll kill my video. Hopefully that helped. So yeah, it has a built-in app framework that you can build. This requires code. It's not something you can customize the actual interface. Migration scripting is the ability to say, this is what my content models look like in code. You're basically just writing JavaScript scripts. This is what my model looks like now. You can also like transition it. So if a field, for example, changes names or moves to a different model or content type, you can basically model that out with scripts and then move that across all your various environments. Getting a little in the weeds, I mentioned webhooks already, so that's the easy one. Basically, anytime any content changes, it can fire off a webhook. You can also listen from webhooks from external sources as well. And then it has this concept of environments and aliases. And this kind of has to do with your development workflow. You can spin up and spin down environments, almost like you would spin up Git branches that replicate all your content in a given content space, so that you can, for example, if you're working on a new feature, you could spin up a feature environment off of a Contentful space, have access to all the content that's in that production environment. And then using migration scripting, you can actually make your content model move up from your feature space through a QA space into production. It's all kind of streamlined for you. And weaknesses. Really, I love working in content as a service. It's content as a service. It's a totally different way of working with CMSs, but I think once you get used to it, it's a lot of fun. I will say content modeling, which I'm going to show in a second, is really easy to conceptualize, but once you get into actually doing it in practice, it's hard to master. There's a lot of nuance to it that takes some getting used to. At DEG, we're still trying to kind of pilot how this looks as a practice area. And one thing I'm doing is, or that we're doing is trying to partner with our business analysts to do some of the business requirements around what needs to be modeled, and then figuring out how that process works into development. So how do we take the business requirements, outline a content model, and then also programmatically with migration scripting, get that into the CMS. Client training and learning curve. I will say I almost need to do a presentation like this for every client that I interact with, because it's so different from traditional CMSs that there is a bit of a learning curve there. And then I mentioned that it's a la carte. So you're taking these collections of like best of breed services and you're compiling them into one cohesive thing for your project. That takes a little bit more planning and decision making up front. You need to make sure that, for example, your search add-on or your digital asset management service meet your client needs and also interface correctly with Contentful or your CAS system. So there's a little more pain there. But I think even with all those in mind, it's a really powerful way to approach things. I'm going to show a demo. Those always go great on live calls. It looks like I've got about 15 minutes or so. Before I do that, does anybody have any questions on kind of the informational stuff? Okay, I will get going here. So first of all, I want to show you guys the Contentful interface. And I mentioned content modeling, which is really kind of the bread and butter of what Contentful does. The demo I'm going to show you today, I don't have as actually spitting out an application, but Contentful's output is, you can actually do it with a RESTful API, but the preferred method for most people is actually GraphQL. So I'm going to show you the GraphQL interface over here, which I've got fired up. But we're basically building an imaginary shoe manufacturer. So this is a company that makes shoes. And the two things I want to show you today is that we are going to build out a website product page. And then I mentioned omnichannel. So we're going to do a store kiosk screen. So imagine you step foot into, man, I don't go into stores anymore. You go into Macy's, right? And there's a little video screen in there that shows you the new shoes. Our shoe company is called ABC Shoes. So this would be a little kiosk screen that says like all the new offerings from ABC Shoes. So I'm going to start pretty low level here. The first thing I want to do is I want to model out some videos. I'll show you what my model looks like. So this is how I model out a video. You'll notice this doesn't have anything related to the presentation layer of this video. This is purely modeling out what a video is. So I would have a title field. The title is basically just describing what that video is. I would have a slug. Think of a slug as like the short identifier if you were going to build out a URL segment, so you know where the video lives. A little description text and then a URL. I'm just hosting these on YouTube. Within this, let me see how I set this one up. Actually, I'm going to come back to this. But within any given field within a content model, you see you can do a lot of customizations. Localization is the multilingual support. You can also do a ton of pretty impressive validations on the content entry. So in other words, as the content enterer is putting stuff in, they would have to meet all of these requirements in order to save the page. Otherwise, they'll have to go back and edit it. So I can make it required, unique, limit character counts. I can set patterns. And I'm going to come back to these last two because I have one that shows that a little better. And it's also got some good appearance things built in. So if you're doing something like a URL or a drop-down menu versus a single line text, you can set all that kind of stuff. Slug's kind of cool. I mentioned Slug, it just auto-generates for you as you're typing. So that's my video model. And I'm actually going to now go over to the content. And I've already pre-entered content here. So let me just show you videos. So here's my 3 videos that I have. These are my 3 shoes. I've got your business shoe, your casual shoe, and I'm sorry, it's a running shoe, Run Forest Run. and kids shoe. So we're going to go into business time. And yes, this is the Flight of the Conchords business time song for business time shoes. So you see, this is what I built out for my video. So again, this has nothing to do with shoes or the web page or the software kiosk. This is just literally modeling out this video. So I'm going to go back and show you some more modeling things. So next I want to look at my shoe. So this is how I would model a shoe. So this is a product that my company sells. At this point, I don't want anything in here to have anything to do with its presentation. I just want to model out what that shoe, like what information is related specifically to that shoe. So again, I'm going to have a title field and a slug field. And then Contentful has built-in image hosting. You can hook it up to a third-party DAM system if you want to. You can also host directly from Contentful, and it's got a CDN behind everything. So really powerful way to do images that way too. Excuse me. I mentioned I was going to come back to this field right here. So I can, because I'm choosing an image type in my model, I can require it obviously. I can also set all kinds of validations on what that image can be. So if you've worked in a CMS that doesn't give you this level of flexibility, this is really powerful stuff. And then I can also choose what file types I want to allow. So I'm not hosting videos, but if I had done like hosted videos, I could check this checkbox. In this case, all I want is images. So the only thing I'm going to allow is an image file. And you can do all kinds of nice things to customize the interface, like a custom error message and image dimensions, all the things that you might want. So that's my shoe. And I'm going to show you what that looks like here. So in content, I've added these 3 shoes. Coincidentally, they're similar to my video names. I'm going to go into the business time. So you see I have my title field, there's that slug field, and then this is my image. Really nice interface because as you're working from an item, when you click something that links to like a nested item, like this asset, for example, it pops up this field. And it's got all your kind of built-in features that any respectable CMS would have for editing image sizes and modifying things on the fly. So that's my shoes, and I showed you a video already. So let's look at website. So now I want to make a website, right? I've got my title, my slug. You're getting used to that one. I'm going to add a product description field. I just have that set up as short text. So nothing real crazy there. Now I'm going to use what's a really key thing to Contentful, which is reference fields. I mentioned how you can kind of like reuse and reposition content as you need it. So I have what's called a reference field. I want to reference the product. And this is what's called a one-to-one reference. So I'm saying this field can have one value. And I'm only allowing that to be a shoe content type or entry type. If I wanted to allow anything else, I could, or if I had like maybe I sell shoes and socks, for example, I could add socks here. So that's a one-to-one. I'm saying that the product associated with this web page is this field. Videos, on the other hand, is a one-to-many field. So pretty similar approach. I'm saying that I'm only going to allow videos, but because it's a one-to-many, I'm allowed to put as many videos associated with this product as I want in this field. And then last but not least, I want to show you page content. So this is the RTE. Again, if you've worked in other CMSs that don't exactly give you much flexibility in terms of the RTE, this is probably like a lightning bolt coming down right now. You can actually choose what people are allowed to do within that interface. So you can set different formatting options. You can enable or disable hyperlinks. And then embedded entries is awesome too. So if you have a content type that you want to embed right smack dab in the middle of your RTE content, you can plop it in. And when that gets output to the GraphQL layer, you can just pull that all out programmatically, and it's all contextual, and you know exactly what it is. Lots of stuff you can do here with RTEs. I'm not going to go through all this. So that's my web page. I want to go show you that one. So here is, we're going to make a web page that's introducing the new business time shoe for 2020. So this is like a product page or a landing page. So there's my title, there's my slug. I've got my description, which I think we said it was just a simple text field. This is my one-to-one of saying which product is associated with this. I can click that and go to, like I mentioned, you can kind of drill down into deeper layers here. So I could go make changes to that core shoe item while I'm in here. I can also remove that, and then I would add a different shoe to it. I'm not going to do that right now. And then here's my RTE. If for whatever reason, let's say right in the middle of that, I want to put a video, I'm going to do, I always forget, I think it's inline entry. And I want to pull in the business and a video right in the middle of there. I can do that. And then when I get that content out, I'll get that within the JSON response. Got one out of there. And then videos is one-to-many, I mentioned. So let's say I have multiple videos for this. I can actually add new videos in context, or I can add a new one. Oops, I did that backwards, actually. That is actually going to create a draft of another one. But you'll see I have 2 videos associated here now. I'm actually going to remove that one. Excuse me. So that's my web page. Now let's say I want to do a store kiosk. So store kiosk is going to be different. I'm going to have a title, a slug, a description. But then instead of a single product, since this is a store kiosk showing all of what's going to be all the 2020 or 2021 shoes, I do a reference of many. And when I do the validation on that, I say only shoes. And if I go look at the store kiosk page, you'll see this, my title, my slug, my description, multiple products. I forgot to mention this earlier, but if I want to reorder these, it's just drag and drop. Very nice, clean, easy to follow interface. And that's pretty much it from the interface layer. I mentioned it has kind of a built-in DAM for you. This is how image management is handled. So the next thing I want to show you is the actual output of this. So all I have going here is kind of a, I think it's actually built, I think it's a Gatsby installation, but I just wanted something that gave me a GraphQL interface so I could show you guys what was going on. So if you guys are familiar with GraphQL queries, it's you can basically write your own query as opposed to REST where you have to have an endpoint stood up that meets all your, pulls back the data based on parameters that you feed it. With GraphQL, you can generate your queries on the fly based on the data that you have. So if I want to pull back all of my contentful videos, for example, I can go, takes a little practice knowing where everything is, but not too bad. I want to pull back the slug and the title of every video. And you'll see there are my videos right there. So this would be fed directly into, for example, my React application, and I can pull that content in directly. So let's get a little more advanced from there. Let's say I want to do, let's see, let's do our product page. And let's see, slug title. And I want all my videos. I'm just going to get the titles of them, but I could also get let's get the slug and the URL. Let's just keep going. What else do I got? Description. There we go. Oh, and there's my product. So I think this is basically everything we modeled out. I'm going to take, yeah. Okay, so I hit play, and you'll see here is my Contentful web page. So I'm getting back an array of all of these. You'll see that's what this edges is. I can also query a specific one, so that's not a big deal to do. But you'll see I get back my title, my slug, each of the videos with that YouTube URL, product description, and also a link out to the product itself. So one thing I wanted to show, and then I've got about 5 minutes to open it up for questions here. Sorry, I'm trying to remember where I put it. Oh, it actually was in there. I won't show store kiosk screen for sake of time, but I think you guys get what's going on there. Sorry, I'm trying to remember. All right, so I want to show you page content because RTEs are pretty fascinating. I'm going to undo all this, make it a little easier to follow. Let's do description. Page content. There we go. I'm going to pull back as little as possible to make this more understandable. So within page content, I want to pull back for, there's a bunch of different ways you can do this, but what I'm essentially grabbing here is my JSON content from the RTE. There we go. I should add too, if this is overwhelming, Contentful actually has a bunch of NPM components that let you parse through this automatically, so you don't have to page through this. But this is insane. So there's no HTML whatsoever coming back here. It's literally telling me, for example, that my value within my H2 is this node type. So I could pull that out. I have contextual context of what's going on here. For this one, for example, I know that this is a paragraph. This is another paragraph. So hopefully you guys are seeing that this is pretty flexible and definitely keeps the hierarchy of what your content is. So really powerful stuff there. The other really quick thing I wanted to show was images, which I should go to, let's see. Let's see. I'm just gonna go to the assets directly. Okay. So I mentioned that they have an actual image API that has a ton of power built into it. If you can see my query options here, this is out of the box what Contentful gives you. So I can get back direct references to the file, or I can get optimized images that are coming from the CMS directly. So a lot of times I'll work from the Fluid starting point. Maybe I want to base64 encode that image. So there it is. Maybe I want to set an aspect ratio. Actually, I haven't played with that much, so I'm not going to show that. But you'll see here, I can set focus on the image, so I could actually do basically art direction on the image based on how I request it from the API. If you think about that from your application, how you might be able to leverage that power, that's pretty awesome. Maybe I want to pull back a maybe your Lighthouse scores are saying I need to use next generation image optimizations, so I want to get back WebP files. There's your WebP. If I want to get back, there's a really low, I gotta find it. It might be in sizes. Actually, I'm not sure which one it is, but if you've ever seen a website that loads like a really low res version of an image while the higher res loads in, you can do all of that with this functionality. Can you guys still hear me? I think I might have lost my share there.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay. That actually was the tail end of my demo. That was pretty much all I wanted to show, was that image API. So lots of really powerful image optimizations coming straight out of the API. So I talked right up to the 45 there. I don't know if people can go longer, but any questions or anything I can answer for anybody on the platform?
I'll just jump in real fast, Aaron. Yeah, feel free to stick around for questions. If you have to drop, cool. We are always looking for speakers. No one is booked for next month. We have someone after that, but plenty of time. If you're interested in speaking, if you want to speak, but you don't know what to speak about, reach out. We have some topics I can suggest. If you're new and you're a little nervous and you want to do some practice, also reach out. I'd be willing to sit through a practice session or look at slides or whatever you want to do. Good way to get started. So if I don't have a chance to say it again, thanks, Aaron. And I'll turn it back over to you for questions. All right, well, I do have a question if no one else does. Could you show, if possible, could you share your screen again and show how internationalization works? Do you have to request a specific language when you're making your graph request?
Let me show you how that works. So in settings, they call it locales, and their argument is that a language isn't the only declarative thing here. So English is your default. I think I was telling you this before the meeting started. You add a new locale like this. It has a lot of built-in ones, or you can do a custom one. So let's say I just want to do Spanish, for an example. Go with that one for fun. This field is more powerful than it alludes to. So you can actually set fallback locale. I was explaining to Joe before the call that I had a client who wanted Spanish pages, but they didn't have all their Spanish content produced in time for the site to go live. By setting an English fallback in the actual GraphQL response, if I'm querying for if I'm querying for Spanish data and it doesn't exist, if this is set as the fallback locale, I just get the English content instead. So not ideal for all clients and projects, but if you have a situation where that's kind of what you're working in, you can do that. And there's other pretty powerful things you could use that for. You can also choose what comes back in your delivery API. You can allow empty fields, all kinds of stuff around this. If this is enabled, I haven't turned this on, so this bear with me here. It worked. When I go edit content from now on, so let's say this page. Oh shoot, I would have to enable this for fields. Let's say I'm at store kiosk and I want the description to be multilingual. I would check this box. And when I go back to,
I think we lost you, Aaron.
oh, you guys there?
I can hear you.
Yeah, I lost you for a sec there, Ben.
Okay, can you still see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. I'm not sure where I lost you, but I basically enabled localization for the description field on the store kiosk. So when I go back to edit store kiosk now, you'll see that description. Oh, it's not going to cooperate just because I'm.
Oh, there it is.
Did you see it? Am I missing it?
Oh, I just saw the translation.
Oh, here we go. I might not have this set up quite correctly, but basically there's your Spanish field. And it'll default back to this if there's no content. And then in the JSON response, let me kill my, or the GraphQL response, I should say. I'm gonna, I guess I should have done this before starting and stopping my server here. I'll just put, I speak fluent Spanish, as you can tell. Spanish description. Should be built shortly. That was kiosk, right? I guess so there.
Oh.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
there you can see there's various ways to query this, but this is the basic idea. You get it back as a separate node. There's a way to do it differently than this, but you just get it like that. It's like an array of items. I think there's a way to check locale.
So you just have to know what the
There
order
it
is. Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
Oh, okay, that makes much more sense.
there's other ways to do it. So anything in purple here is let's see if I can get it to. There you go. So I want to filter just to totally around how you want to structure your GraphQL requests. And then, like I said, if you, because of how I set that up, if this doesn't exist, it'll just default back to the English content. You don't have to do that, but that's an option for you.
Hey, I had a question for your, you were talking about the RTE capabilities in Contentful. I was just curious if they have, like one of the problems we have with Drupal is that our content editors will add content and the RTE puts 17 nested span tags around the content. So it makes it
Yep.
kind of hard to parse. So I was just wondering if they have ways to clean that up or if that gets propagated in the JSON.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's funny because I was dealing with that on a different CMS like literally this morning. So I can feel your pain there. Like I think that's a pretty common use case on those RTEs. What's interesting is since it's not outputting HTML, I don't honestly know how it works under the hood. If you looked at that RTE, there's not an like an HTML button, which a lot of them have, where you can kind of drop into code view.
Yeah.
And that's because it's not spitting out HTML. Like at no point is that thing HTML. So as far as like that concept of span tags living in there, it doesn't do that at all. It just, whatever you set as like a new paragraph, for example, is just going to come out with a paragraph node on the JSON, but it won't wrap it with any superfluous junk.
Very cool.
Yeah, that one's a game changer if you're used to traditional RTEs.
Oh yeah.
And Aaron, it looks like there's a couple of questions in chat if you want to look at
Oh,
those.
sure. Client sites. I don't know how much I can talk about that, but we've been doing it for about, like I said, probably 6 months to a year. So we're still relatively new to this, but we've got, we kind of started out with a couple small sites, which I would recommend if you're thinking about bringing this into your organization. And right now we're working on, I guess, kind of like two larger scale, one pretty large scale and one kind of medium scale Contentful site. So we're pretty new too, but we're definitely moving in that direction scale wise. I will say if you're bringing it into your organization, it is enough of a game changer that keep in mind that there's probably value in somebody doing a good deal of documentation and putting a lot of time into like building out what your business processes are for your organization, because it does shift things quite a bit. And then does Contentful have a template for displaying the RTE easily, or do you have to build the display by hand? That's a really good question. And actually, Contentful RTE. So I'm googling around a little bit here. They have some open source projects that actually take the rich text, and yeah, this is a good example. So they have one called document to HTML string coming out of their Contentful packages, this rich text HTML renderer. So yeah, even though that RTE content probably looked a little intimidating, it gives you for sure a lot of flexibility that you could do with it. But as far as like rendering it out, you can do pretty much those 2 lines, and that's it. And those, I think that one of the reasons they do it as JSON too is they offer these across languages. So keep in mind, this is omni-channel. You might want to do this in a native application, or maybe parse through that JSON for a voice skill, or pretty much anything you want to do. So the fact that it's pure data kind of gives you the flexibility, but then they give you a lot of these reusable things to make it easier too. Let's see, did I get all the chat questions?
Yeah, I think you got them all.
Okay.
Anyone else? Questions? Going once, going twice. Cool. Well, thank you very much, Aaron. That was great. And thanks for everyone for coming. We'll see you in March. Have a good one.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you.